Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to present without the video because I've been having challenges with the internet connectivity every time I turn on my video. So I'm going to share with you the findings of the gendered policy response measures of COVID-19 in Zambia. I'm Maru Lubungu from Indaba Agricultural Policy Research Institute. So to begin with my presentation, I would like to talk about the number of COVID waves Zambia has experienced so far. So from the time Zambia recorded the first COVID case, that is in 2020, we have experienced 3 waves with increased daily cases recorded in the 3rd wave, which is just coming to an end. So what are some of the policy mitigation measures that were instituted in Zambia to mitigate the spread of the pandemic? So the government implemented the restrictions on informal markets and restaurants. Also, there was a lockdown at home in some epicenter districts and closure of educational institutions. The government also instituted bans on social gatherings, and there was also limitations on the number of people on the public transport vehicles, and also the bars were closed. So what are some of the effects of these measures? So we did analyze the impact of COVID-19 mitigation measures through a gendered lens. So because of the lockdown that were instituted even in other countries, and Zambia being an import-dependent country for most of its agricultural inputs, we saw an increase in the cost and non-availability of some of the agricultural inputs. And the sectors that were really affected are the fish sector, as well as the poultry sector. I may not go into details now, but later during the panel discussions, I can elaborate more how these 2 sectors were really affected. So for the fish sector, we see that it's a male-dominated, especially at the production stage, and these were highly affected by the high cost of imports. For the backyard poultry farming, this is the area women dominates also in terms of production, and they were highly affected by the cost of inputs and non-availability of some of the inputs. And because of the ban on social gathering, we saw that there was also a limited access to extension services. But we also know that even without the pandemic, there are very few women that have access to such extension services. And so with the pandemic, this really actually affected the majority of the women to access these services. However, we saw that the e-platforms were really promoted in terms of accessing extension services, but still the research showed that there were very few women who had access to such platform, and especially for the female-headed household with only female members, these were highly affected. And because of also the lockdowns and also in terms of the bans on social gatherings, this also saw a disruption in the implementation of developmental activity, and majority of women actually did not participate in such developmental programs. Because of also the limitation in the restrictions in the informal markets, this resulted in an increase in the food waste and losses, especially for the horticultural products. And women in this market are the majority traders, and they are the ones who really experienced more food waste and losses. So what are some of the measures that were put in place to mitigate the effects of COVID? So we also analyzed these measures in relation to women empowerment. I've just picked a few here for the sake of time. So under the fish farming sector, we have an ongoing program, that is the Aquaculture Development Project, that has been supporting farmers in terms of fish farming. So during the pandemic, it also scaled up its activities to include more beneficiaries under this program. So at the time we did this study, about 1,049 were direct beneficiaries under this project, and only 36% were women. UNICEF also implemented an emergency social cash transfer, and out of all the beneficiaries under this program, 55% were women. Then World Fish also supports the fish farming sector, and during the pandemic, it trained about 871 farmers, of which 20% were women. World Food Program also scaled up on its social cash transfer and implemented an emergency social cash transfer, and 50% of the people that benefited from the emergency social cash transfer were women. So from these findings, we saw that women tended to benefit from the social cash transfer and also from the food aid support compared to the participation in the developmental programs that were implemented to cushion the effects of COVID. So this marks the end of my presentation. Thank you all for listening.